In today's society, we are constantly being bombarded with information. Let's take a moment and imagine our world 100 years ago. Scientists say a man living back then could go almost a full year of living and process the same amount of information that today we experience in the space of one day. If we were to think of our mind like a computer processor, every processor has limits on how much information it can handle at once. And they say that the human brain can process as much as 400 billion bits of information per second. But out of the 400 billion bits, you will only be made aware of about 2,000. So in terms of visual processing, the brain can effectively process only about 1% of the information that it takes in. This is because of specific neurons that selectively filter out unimportant visual information. So what happens to all that other information? The 99% that you witness but are completely unaware of. It's stored somewhere in the subconscious mind. It's much like a junk file. The filters that choose which of this information is important are the filters that are creating your perception of reality. Your belief system informs your brain. It creates the parameters that you view the world through. It is what blocks out the 99% and reveals to you the 1%. And your belief system is given to you from your parents, society, from your peer group or work colleagues. If you were to think about artificial intelligence and how it is learning constantly, it's much like your brain. And it also must categorize and sift through information for what is important, looking for that 1%. So, we're all familiar with Siri and Alexa. Siri is gathering up information about you all the time, helping to create a specific experience that you have programmed it to give you. You didn't specifically sit down and program your phone, although you did search for certain things, put things in your calendar, shopped, talked to your friends, you wrote notes, put in addresses, health data, etc. You have given Siri enough information that it knows what you are doing, where you are going, and why most of the time. I remember the first time I woke up and my phone said traffic is light to reach my destination by 9 a.m. I had not programmed this event into my calendar, nor have I ever entered that address into my phone. Due to apps like location, my phone had just recognized a pattern. It noticed that every Sunday morning I was traveling to the same address at this particular time. Our phones and our computers are much like our brains. They are literally showing us what we have programmed them to show us. So if life isn't showing up the way that you like, it makes sense that we must find a way to clear out the old data in our mind and rewrite the program. There is 99% more to see, and with the right filters, everything can look like happiness, joy, and abundance. Imagine that your computer wasn't working. Every time you went to search for one particular thing, something else showed up. You'd be so frustrated. You would sit down, you'd reset to factory settings if you needed to, or sat down and delete cookies, cache, spyware, or just simply reboot. You would sort through old files, deciding which are relevant, and delete or reorganize them because you realize that they may cause conflict with newer programs you're trying to run. Or you may just check for necessary updates. Well, why don't we do this with our life? We are living in a new age, and we need an update. This new age of technology is drastically different than 50 years ago. And if we intend to adapt with grace to this new age, we simply must embrace that and make the changes necessary in the way that we process all of this information being thrown at us through the apps and the screens and our phones and the videos. Of course, we can try and limit this stimuli by moving to the Himalayan mountains, or find some rural community somewhere that lives a slower, simpler life. For most of us, that won't work, and we are unable to escape the constant stimuli and the constant bombardment of information. So, instead, we implement a routine that allows for very few variables. Habit and routine allows for some comfort, but we must be willing to grow and be challenged from time to time. Just like water that gets trapped in a puddle and stays stagnant will inevitably grow fungus and algae and begin to stink and become toxic. If we become stagnant in our life, we too can become toxic. Humans are habitual by nature. We like routine and we like to know what to expect. The problem with that is always knowing what to expect takes all the magic out of life. You eventually have no room for miracles, and by attempting to keep out all the bad experiences, you end up stopping yourself from having the experiences that bring about unexpected joy, companionship, love, etc. When everything is planned, life just flies past us in a series of waking up, doing, and going to sleep with no adventure or wonderment. You flip on the autopilot switch and suddenly your life flies by. The brain loves to solve problems. It wants you to expand and keep moving, which is exactly why we've found ourselves in the conundrum we are in. Innovation and forward movement is innate within human nature. I don't expect you to run off to the Himalayan mountains and hide in a cave. We want to be in stimuli. We just have to learn how to process it. We are moving so fast, and we just never stop and take the time to pause and look around. We're so lost in the mind, we've stopped seeing our surroundings altogether. We are only focused on the 1%, forgetting about the 99. How many times have you walked past a tree without bothering to look at it? You know it's a tree, and that's enough, so why bother? And now that we have labeled everything, we don't have a reason to really look at it. This creates a disconnect from life. Many of us have recognized this disconnect in some fashion or another. Either you feel anxious because you have too much uncertainty about the future, or you haven't quite processed all that you've already experienced. This can result in feeling sluggish and depressed because you've built a routine in an attempt to remove all variables from your life, and this has taken your once flowing stream and created a giant barrier, causing the water to stop flowing and become stagnant. That stagnant water is becoming toxic and murky. Most of us eventually end up at our doctor's office looking to solve the symptoms of this toxicity. Anxiety, difficulty sleeping, or depression. And the doctor happily pulls out his prescription pad, and that may clear up some of the murkiness, but it doesn't remove the barrier. So how do we solve this problem and find a way to change the filter we view the world through? And how do we help the brain process all this information while still staying connected to the wonderment of life? We need to give the mind downtime to catch up and reboot. We all do this at night when we turn the brain off, but more and more of us are so overwhelmed and the brain is processing so much at the end of the day that sleep becomes difficult or interrupted. We have to find new ways to balance and connect with moments of stillness where the brain can catch up, process, and maybe recenter. For thousands of years, dating as far back as before written word, the ancient rishis, holy men, and seers, those who devoted their lives to extensively studying the human system and intently watching nature and the cosmos in search of the harmony within the whole. They all arrived at the same conclusion. Inner peace, clarity, and overall health of the entire human system can be obtained through sitting in meditation. They even developed a process called yoga that prepares the body and mind for meditation. So if we all know, which we do, that a few minutes sitting in meditation would greatly impact the ability to find joy and peace, why don't we do it? If we've been taught the importance of meditation and made it a part of our life from a young age, well, it would be simple. But since most of us have never rebooted our system, when we sit in stillness, we become overwhelmed with the entanglement behind the scenes. And we resort to our habitual response to stress, which is to do something. Since doing something is the opposite of meditation, we find ourselves stuck in this vicious cycle. Just like if you were to keep avoiding the gym, you would pack on pounds or lose muscle and become slow and sluggish. The same is true for the mind. If we keep avoiding this need to process all the information, will inevitably overwhelm our whole system at some point. And when that happens, we will be forced to slow down. Because if you don't, your physical and mental health could be at stake. Meditation is most certainly the answer. I have several guided meditations on my channel. The one that I highly recommend as a reboot is a meditation called I Am Nothing, I Want Nothing, I'm Doing Nothing. I hope that you will find this meditation and try to do it at least once a day. Make this part of your daily routine, and I will guarantee that this will have huge results in your overall health and well-being.